Here in Section 10, we're going to kick off a fairly lengthy conversation on the topic of U.S. air imports, the role of the freight forwarder. It is without question that air freight forwarders serve as a vital link between importers, the air carriers, the airlines, and the entire air import trade community. Freight forwarders really are those travel agents for cargo that are coordinating amongst all players, vendors overseas, importers in the United States, and everybody in between to make sure that air freight moves correctly. Some of the considerations, our first sub-bullet point, monetary advantages. Freight forwarders are freight consolidators. They negotiate rates with airlines based on larger volumes of cargo than any one importer could likely do on their own. Working with a freight forwarder as a U.S. importer, even though they do serve as a middle person, has monetary advantages. There's a component of operational integration. That's just a fancy way of saying we only have to deal with one party as a U.S. importer. That freight forwarder, that travel agent for cargo, is going to coordinate everything on our behalf. Pick up at origin, consolidation, documentation, all that stuff. And of course, part and parcel of that value proposition is the freight forwarder's customer service, not only to the U.S. importer, but to the vendor overseas as well, because they have an interest in things going well also. To summarize, there's a money component, there's an operational component, there's a customer service component, all advantageous if managed properly to the U.S. importers. Second bullet, forwarders offer a variety of services across multiple modes of transport. Air freight is the topic of Module 8, but forwarders can offer virtually any mode of transport, either individually or as an integrated solution. For certain, as we state in our last bullet point, the essence of the forwarder's air import model is freight consolidation, and we're going to talk a lot about that here as well as in upcoming sections. Elaborating a little bit, or at least to start elaborating on what freight consolidation is all about, in our first bullet, based on cargo commitments to airlines for specific airport pairs, air freight forwarders negotiate rates that are lower than those published in what is referred to as the TACT, the air cargo tariff. That bullet point is kind of a mouthful, but basically, air freight forwarders aggregate cargo from multiple shippers on behalf of multiple importers, take that aggregated cargo and go to the airlines and negotiate rates that are cheaper than what is published in a publicly available tariff that is called the TACT. We'll see the TACT more as we move forward. If we think TACT, think of high rates per kilo. Second bullet, forwarders must then seek importers that have inbound air cargo that match the city pairs, day of the week, and flight departure times. That's what forwarders do. That's why forwarders have big sales departments, because they have to go out and fill their commitments to the airlines and find importers that have freight coming from a specific origin to a specific destination during a specific time period. Last bullet, when forwarders aggregate cargo from different shippers and consignees for shipment by an airline on the same date and flight, it is referred to as an air freight consolidation. Multiple shippers on the same flight, all organized by the same freight forwarder. Let's harken back to a conversation we had during the section on IATA when we talked about accreditation. As an accredited IATA agent, a forwarder can negotiate both rate and space agreements with airlines. That's pretty key. We as an importer want to be working with forwarders that have IATA accreditation. What are some of these rate structures that we're talking about? Well, the first is a spot rate. We talked a little bit about this previously, but a spot rate is just that. When a forwarder calls an airline on a Monday and says, hey, I have 2 tons coming in from Milan, Italy into JFK, what can you give me on the spot rate market? Give me a quote right now. That's a spot rate. Forwarders can have contract rates as well over a period of time. An entire year for freight coming out of Milan to JFK, the forwarder has contract rates. Within that structure of contract rates, in our third sub-bullet, we talk about tiered weight agreements, which is by weight range, where the rates differ from 45 to 100 kilos. It might be $5 a kilo. 100 to 500 kilos might be a little bit less. 500 to 1,000, a little bit less. Freight forwarders, if they negotiate in that way, oftentimes will quote customers, will quote importers in that same way. it's not unusual to see quotes or even bids from freight forwarders to large importers that have a tiered weight structure. One rate for 45 to 100 kilos, another for up to 500, another up to 1,000, etc. Forwarders can negotiate pallet position rates as well and turn around and resell the space on those pallets on a per kilo basis to U.S. importers. If a U.S. importer has enough freight to occupy an entire pallet, that importer can negotiate a pallet rate with the freight forwarder, just like the forwarder negotiates a pallet rate with the airline. And then, of course, the heavy players will take up an entire aircraft or a portion of an aircraft through what is called a blocked space agreement, a BSA, as it's called. As a trade tip, we mentioned this previously, we'll say it a couple of times, published air freight rates can be found in the TACT, the air cargo tariff. They are almost always, if not always, higher than those rates offered by freight forwarders on a consolidated basis. Again, we'll talk more about the TACT in just a bit. In addition to its core import service offering, freight forwarders provide several other services in the spirit of an integrated offering. First of all, coordination of cargo pickup from overseas suppliers. The truck that goes to the factory that takes the cargo to the origin airport. Multi-vendor assemblies, as we see in our second sub-bullet point. This is a little different terminology. The mode of transport is definitely different, but this can be likened to the buyer's consolidation model that we spoke of during our ocean model, where a U.S. importer has multiple vendors, 3, 4, 5 vendors on the outskirts of Sydney, Australia. Instead of having individual shipments, individual airway bills prepared for every vendor, forwarders can receive inbound cargo from multiple vendors at an air freight warehouse, put them all together, assemble them, and send it as one shipment. That's quite common. Preparation of transport docks, the airway bill, for example, cargo packaging and labeling, and also, depending on the nature of the cargo, can provide temperature-controlled shipments. As a trade tip, we've said it a couple times, let's get it out there explicitly. When quoted by weight, international air cargo charges are expressed on a per kilo basis. $3 a kilo, $5 a kilo, bearing in mind that 1 kilo equals 2.2046 pounds. We'll come back to that little math in just a bit too. The last slide in this section, a continuation of the services offered by freight forwarders. Pallet and ULD buildup, we talked about that pretty extensively. Airport transfers, meaning at origin, goods are shipped from the freight forwarder to the airline, and at destination, from the airline, once goods are cleared, out to importers. Cargo tracking, that's a given. Forwarders, if they're properly licensed, will also offer customs clearance at destination. That is very common in the US, Europe, and other markets. And then, once goods are cleared, local delivery or long-haul delivery, as we spoke of several sections ago. That will be it for this particular section. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about the air import service model, freight consolidation versus direct shipments. We're really getting into the meat of the matter from both an operational, documentation, and financial perspective. These will be good upcoming sections.